This is the Forbes Books Podcast, conversations with amazing humans who are impacting the world of business and beyond. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this week we're going to talk about two of my favorite things, entrepreneurship and football. My guest is Christian Ponder, a former football star turned business leader on a mission to empower athletes. After a standout career at Florida State and a run in the NFL after being a first-round pick, Christian has co-founded The Post, which provides a private community for athletes to leverage their skills and break stereotypes. Christian, welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate it, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I got to start with a quarterback question, Christian. I am a lifelong suffering New York Jets fan, and I think over the last decade plus, we've drafted 3 quarterbacks in the top 10, and it looks like they all have not worked out. And so I want to ask you, as someone who's drafted the NFL, first-round pick, went through the grind, for fans, it's hard for us to process this of the person is an amazing college football player, slinging it all over the place, and as soon as they get to the NFL, they seem like a deer lost in the woods. Why is it so hard for these quarterbacks to make that jump?
I think a lot of it, and I don't think this gets talked about a lot, is really, it depends on the situation, right, that a quarterback steps into, especially, when you're drafted top 10, usually it means you're going to a team that probably isn't that good, has underperformed. That's why they need to go draft a quarterback high, and they're even in the position to do so. And so you already know you're probably not stepping into a great situation. Mark Sanchez, obviously that fizzled out, but he made the AFC Championship at least once, maybe twice.
2 years in a row. 2 years in a row, yeah.
So that's pretty good. Especially in a day and age now where there's not a lot of patience for young quarterbacks, right? Like you basically have 2 years to prove your worth, and if you can't prove it in 2 years, you're done. They're moving on from you. And it's tough, especially again, when you're stepping into a situation where it's not the best. We've only seen a few people in the last 20 years, or at least the last 15 years who really stuck. I think there was a stat, through 2020, something like only 2 quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round between 2008 and 2020 were still on the same team that they were drafted by, which is wild. I think it all really depends on the situation. As a quarterback, right, it's helpful to have a great defense. It's helpful to have a great offensive line. And usually those teams, they don't necessarily have that when they're drafting in the top 10. And obviously it's a pretty big leap from college to NFL, but I think it's really situational based, and you have to step into a good team with a good defense, a good offensive line to have the ability to play well. You look at Peyton Manning, right? Like his first year was terrible. Obviously he's one of the best quarterbacks to ever do it. I don't know what that looks like if he gets drafted first round, top 5 overall like in 2024. Like I don't know how much patience a team or a fan base has now for someone to have a really bad year in year one.
Now, let's talk about my current quarterback, Zach. Poor Zach.
Yeah.
But Zach has been going through a lot since he got drafted. And you were 14th overall with Minnesota. And it's funny how similar you two both are, because you were both drafted by teams that were struggling, both with defensive head coaches, both with like limited talent around you. But the one thing that drives me crazy about Zach is that the easy stuff is hard for him. Like he's like a screen pass or just dumping it off. Is it because, and I know you're not in his brain, is it because there's so much to process that the little things go by the wayside?
I think that's part of it. When you step into an offensive system in the NFL, it's a lot more complex, right? There's a lot more responsibility on the quarterback. Defenses are a lot more complex, but yeah, like you got to make the easy throws. Zach is obviously very talented. I think what I've seen in Zach is when things aren't going well and you feel like every play like has to be a big play, or every play has to be a positive play. And sometimes a positive play is just throwing it away, right? Like taking an incompletion. Sometimes you have to take a sack instead of forcing a ball down the field. But when you're in a situation you feel like it's this steep uphill climb, like, yeah, I've got to make a big play on every play, and it usually ends up costing you with that mentality. And I think for him, it's a lot of fear, like in all sports, especially the quarterback position.
As being, from a New Yorker myself, booing athletes is part of tradition, and Zach's heard his boos. But you played in Minnesota for 3 years, and you got booed the snot out of you. And it's so funny. People are like, oh, it's New York. They're a tough crowd. Boston fans are tough. But you got booed in Minnesota. I mean, what was that like in a city like that where supposedly, Minnesota nice, but what was that experience like for you?
Well, every team boos, right? Like I think a fan base, you pay money because you want to go get entertained. You're entertained when your team wins. When it's not winning, you're like, what did I pay my money for to come watch the team lose? And so I understand the frustration. I look back on my career and I had some bad games and some really stupid plays. Obviously, like I think about it a lot. And so I get it. Now, my argument as a player is, how is that helpful, right? Like as a quarterback, I hear those boos. All right, that's going to make me play a lot better. Like it's not helpful. It's counterproductive. And, but I understand the reasoning of like, I'm pissed off that I paid money to come watch this game and, this guy's costing us the game. I fully understand that. But if you want your team to turn around and win, booing is probably not the most effective tool in the tool belt to help get it done.
All right. Last thing about your career is, even looking back at my career in broadcasting, like every once in a while, I remember like, oh God, why did I say this? Why did I do that? Are there still bad plays that pop up in your brain at this point, like years later? Like, why did I throw that interception? When I was playing the Cardinals, like, does that ever come up, like, just in flashbacks?
All the time. I think there's a great question that we ask people oftentimes, like, do you love to win or do you hate to lose? And I hate to lose, right? And so what keeps me up at night, like, I definitely think about those types of mistakes way more often than I think about like the big wins and the big plays, and because I hate to lose, and I think there's something motivational to that. It's definitely it drives me to continue to learn, to get better, to not make those mistakes, those types of dumb mistakes now in the business world. But yeah, I mean, I could name one after another. Like we could probably have a whole 3-hour conversation about every mistake that I made on the field that I can remember and pinpoint. Right? Like my freshman or my rookie in the NFL, we're playing at Oakland at home, and we were up. I was running the ball well, and I remember rolling out to the right, and we were on the 3-yard line. Clearly, no one was open, and instead of just throwing out of bounds, I tried to force in the back play, interception, like turn the game around. They end up winning, right? Like I picture playing same rookie year again, playing the Denver Broncos. I threw for almost 400 yards, but again, and red zone mistakes as a quarterback, right? It's the worst time to make a mistake. They go blitz zero. I held the ball for too long. Ball gets knocked out of my hands. Fumble. Turns the game around. We lose the game. And so, like, I there's a bunch more just like that that I can bring up and we can talk about.
You're keeping your therapist in business, I guess, because every once in a while, I'm sure when you're sitting on the couch or something, you're like, man, I remember that pick six I threw against the Seahawks. But all right, that's enough of reminiscing about your career. Now I want to get into how you segued post-career. And I guess let's start with why the post, because I'm sure as a professional athlete, I don't think, Christian, I ever heard any stories of you, gambling away thousands of dollars in Vegas or buying boats and jet skis and stuff like that. So you probably have a nice little pile of money there. So what makes you decide what you want to do for the rest of your life? Because one of the things that I've always found frightening, again, I have no talent whatsoever in terms of athletics. So, but like the idea of being retired in your 30s is just like mind-boggling to me. So, and I know part of being an athlete is that you have the short run and you take what you can. But when you get into retirement when you're in your 30s, do you even know what you want to do next? Because I'm sure because I think at the end you were even still trying to try out for teams. So it's not like there was like a really hard close. It was kind of a slow kind of middling before you decided to fully retire. But what goes through your mind like, what am I going to do next?
Yeah, well, it actually was a bit different for me. So last year, 2016 with the Niners, I had the option to go play for 2 more teams, and I decided to walk away. Our second kid was on the way. I didn't want to be the consummate journeyman. My confidence was shot, and so I knew it was time to hang it up. And then pretty quickly we moved to New York City. I got my undergrad in finance, got my MBA. My dad's been in finance, and so that's where I figured that's where it started down the wealth management path. And so. But on paper, right, like I had it all together, like I knew what I wanted to do, but the struggle was still there, very much there. And I think it's hard for athletes if they transition out for a number of reasons, right? I think there's an identity crisis, there's a loss of a sense of purpose. You walk away from a really strong knit community. You walk away from a really structured day and routine where you have someone telling you what to do, how to do it, when to do it, where to do it at all times, and everything's revolved around your sport. And then you enter a space where it's kind of paralysis by analysis of like, now I could do anything that I want to do. What am I actually interested in? What am I good at? Like what what are my strengths that would serve me well in what type of industry and what role, and then you're fighting some uphill battle where society still views athletes as some sort of liability. It's like our value peaks when we're playing sports, and then it's all downhill from there. And so I dealt with those things. I didn't necessarily deal with the paralysis by analysis of like trying to figure out what I wanted to do, but I definitely dealt with this sense of loss of an identity, and definitely a loss of community. I've been an athlete my whole life. It's a huge part of my identity and my story and how I operate in this world. And it's also the community that I've belonged to for a really long time. I've been on teams and locker rooms surrounded by athletes, and athletes are the people who I get along with best, who I enjoy being around the most, the people I have the most in common with. And it was the first time in my life where I was formally removed from that group, and it sucked. And I had this void, especially in New York City, like, in a place of 8 million plus people. I still felt like I didn't have a place to belong. I joined a bunch of different things, joined Soho House and some other, joined the Net and some other social clubs, looked into professional networks, and nothing ever fit for me as an athlete. And when I realized that, I decided that I couldn't be the only athlete that feels that way. And if it doesn't exist, let's go build it. And it's actually, I was sitting in Soho House one day feeling like this place is cool, but I feel super out of place here.
Right.
These people are nice, they're great, but they're not my type. It's not my tribe. Yeah. And I thought, what if all these people in here were athletes? Like that would feel like home for me. And that's where it started.
Wow. Great. That's awesome. And I'm just thinking back at, when Tom Brady retired 4 times or whatever. I lost count of how many times he retired. But every time he retired, he said the one thing he missed most was his guys, the camaraderie. And obviously you're trying to fill that. What does that feel like? Because I think most people, unless you've played athletics for an extended period of time, I think, I played high school football poorly, but it was cool. But it was me. It was only like a few years. And then, so there was that. But you literally, since you probably picked up a football till you retired, were surrounded by a bunch of sweaty guys. What does it feel like when that's ripped away from you? Like, what do you tell me? If I don't mean to psychoanalyze you here, but what does that feel like in terms of like just your being? Because you said it's such a big part of your identity.
Look, it's lonely, right? Like that's probably the best word to describe it. You go from being a part of this community, the guys, like you talk, whether it's men or women, right? You talk to athletes, hey, what do you miss most about playing? And you're going to get some version of that the vast majority of times, the locker room, the team, the camaraderie, the guys, whatever it is. And, we're built to be in community, right? We're made to be connected with others. And I think obviously we're dealing with this loneliness epidemic outside of just athletes, right? But I think the athletes and probably people in the military deal with this transition in a unique way. And you go from being every day having this really tight-knit sense of community with guys who are like-minded individuals, share a lot of the same interest systems and value systems, and really an identity. And you're with them in a space where it really does become like a family. It's like your safe space, like the things that are talked about in the locker room. You don't necessarily talk about good or for bad outside of the locker room. And so when you leave that behind, it's really hard to replicate that anywhere else. It's hard to find people who remind you of yourself, right? You get into the behavioral science behind it, right? Like we're attracted and feel connected to people that remind us of ourselves because we're most familiar with things that we are comfortable with, or we're most comfortable with things that we are more familiar with, and we're the most familiar with ourselves because we see ourselves every day in the mirror. And so when you leave that behind, it's really hard to feel like you have that connection point. And then you throw on the purpose issues or the routine and structure issues, and it just gets tough.
And that led you to the Post, and you mentioned that I guess I'll make it's like Soho House for athletes. I guess it could be an easy way for people who understand how Soho House works. And I'm the same way with you, Christian. I've been invited there a couple times, and I feel like the uncoolest person on the planet. So I totally feel your vibe, even though you're like a good-looking quarterback and all that stuff. Everyone always feels out of place. Everyone always feels uncomfortable in their skin, no matter how good it appears on the outside world. So what's the vibe at the Post? We all know the vibe at the Soho House. It's like good-looking people dressed really well. They're drinking very expensive cocktails, and I know it's more to that. But I'm being silly about it. But like, what's the vibe at the Post?
Yeah, look, I think it's a little more relaxed than that. I think, and we're not at the place yet where we're building these 35,000 square foot clubhouses with hotels attached, right? Like, that's potentially a vision down the road. Probably never a hotel, but something that's bigger. I mean, we're 8,400 square feet here in Flatiron, in New York. But we're also much more than what Soho House offers, right? So House is really a social club. Now that's an ancillary part of what we do. And the idea of me seeing a So House thinking like, what if we built something like for athletes was the starting point, but also just going down the social club route felt like it fell really short of the opportunity. There's so much compelling data. First of all, we know that athletes, right? We're a super competitive, performance oriented group. If all we did was hang out and drink fancy cocktails and socialize like that, that wouldn't be enough. You combine that with the fact that there's so much compelling data around the performance of athletes in business, and not just professional athletes, but really speaking to collegiate athletes. I think it was EY or Fortune. Someone did a study a number of years ago talking about females, right? So 94% of women in the C-suite played sports at some point in their life, but 52% of women in C-suites played college sports, right? And women who played NCAA level sports only makes up 0.75% of the U.S. population. So that's a tremendous disparity in outperformance of former college athletes. And then 15 last 21 U.S. presidents were former college athletes. An outsized number of Fortune 500 CEOs were college athletes compared to that size of the population. And so what we know is that athletes come with a lot of soft skills, right? You develop soft skills through sports, work ethic, grittiness, competitiveness, drive, humility, coachability, all these things that really translate really well into performance in business. What made you successful in sport? Same things that make you successful in business, other than like hard skills. How do I put together an Excel sheet, right? Like those things are a lot easier to learn and quicker to learn than it is the time that it takes to develop soft skills. And so for us, how do we not only build the infrastructure of that element for community that so many athletes feel like they're missing, but also continue to tap into those skill sets. We've kind of coined it the athlete operating system, AOS. It's kind of a play on iOS, right? So like, how do we at the Post continue to support that AOS? How do we continue to provide resources and that unlock more of that skill set to perform better? It's this idea that like when we were on team sports, you had teammates, you had coaches, you had training, you had resources, all that were there to make you the best athlete as possible. That was that system. And how do we take that same type of system, give everyone this community, these teammates that are there to hold you accountable and support you as you chase whatever your professional goals are post-sport, give you the coaches, the resources, the training to unlock more of that business and professional potential and even personal potential. That's our idea. That's what we're doing. And it's been really cool. I mean, our oldest member is 72 years old, just said he missed being around athletes. Our average age member is 39 years old. 72% of our members, the VP level and above in business. Our goal is not trying to hold the athlete's hand as they transition out and find their first job post-sport. We're really trying to build this premier aspirational network and membership to be a part of that continues to tap into that athlete identity and give everyone the support of a team of athletes like they have when they're playing sports.
What do you consider as an athlete? Like who is eligible to come into the Post, become a member? Because it's a vague term, because I don't think you're just talking about people that played in the NFL or MLB. It's like, so who are these athletes?
So our definition of athlete is anyone who played NCAA level, National Olympic level, or professional level sports. So yeah, so if you look at our membership, around 40% were Olympic or professional athletes. Everyone else was an NCAA athlete. We have an application process because this is, yes, there's a social element. There's this space that we have, a clubhouse space, but really the core of what we do is providing people this professional network because of the value of the network is really derived by the collective experiences and expertise and influence that people provide to the network. It's the people that matter. We have an application process that people apply to join. We look at two things. We look at athletic experience. So again, everyone had to be at least an NCAA athlete. We look at business experience. So if your athletic experience, so we score them, we add them both up. They have to reach a minimum level of criteria. If your athletic experience looks like you're an 8-year pro in the NFL, then obviously that comes with a certain level of influence and experience that we think provides value to being a part of the network. If your athletic resume looks like, you were a third-string Division III water polo goalie, then we care more about your business merit to make up for your lack of athletic merit. And that's why if you look at our membership today, that over 70% are at the VP level and above in business, primarily because they were former college athletes. But we think that creates a good mix of the people in the room, and you're walking in a room where there's already mutual respect between everybody who's a part of it.
Awesome. That's great. No, because I remember when my friend told me about the Post, I'm like, well, is it just going to be like guys who play in the NFL? Because that's going to be a really small club. And not that I'm a smart entrepreneur. I'm like, that doesn't seem like a great business idea if you're limiting yourself to the number of people that play the NFL. So I want to ask about the idea of athletes post their career and their business acumen, because I think the stories have been told for many, many years about how sometimes an athlete will retire, they'll be dead broke. And it was like, and you saw a lot of it. And I wonder now, since we're a lot savvier and we have more access to information, and this could be just you speaking anecdotally, but are athletes better prepared for retirement than they used to be like 20, 30 years ago? Especially, obviously, now they're making a lot more money, but you can also spend that money rather quickly. So are you seeing that on the ground level in terms of athletes post-playing career better with their financials?
I don't know. I think what I notice is I think professional athletes are more educated. I believe they have more access to more information. They're also caring more about their business things off the field, but I think that's also to the detriment. You see a lot of athletes getting into venture investment and some of these risky, investments, Bitcoin, crypto, all this stuff. And obviously the risk there is pretty high. So it is interesting. I think there is a bit more business savvy, and I do hope eventually that whole narrative of, I think as we think about professional athletes post-sport, our minds immediately go to like the Broke 30 for 30 documentary, right? And I think, again, going back to some of the things we talked about earlier, the issues of the transition makes it really difficult and isolating, and people don't seek help. And now, especially with all of us in some sorts of participation in the idea of like the keeping up with the Joneses via social media, right? Like everyone's living this perfect life. How do I create this perfect life for myself? And athletes do that in comparison with other athletes, even former athletes, right? Like trying to keep up with all the trends and whatever's cool. My hope for the post is that we help a lot of that and alleviate a lot of those issues. I think number one, probably the biggest reason that my hope is that we help that is this idea of like what we're creating is this veteran locker room, right? Like of post-sport athletes. So people who transition well beyond sport, who've done really well in business because of the things they learned in sport. And just like I was a freshman at Florida State, or when I was a rookie in the NFL, I stepped into a locker room of veterans who, Florida State juniors and seniors on the team, or in the NFL, guys who are on their 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th year, and people who knew what it takes to be successful at that level. And same thing here. How do I train? If I'm an athlete looking for something to belong to and not finding it, I can go access this place where people are a little farther along in their careers, but they know and understand what I've gone through in the transition, that it's difficult, but they see my value of what I bring to the table as an athlete, and can ease some of that loneliness. And now I have aspirational examples. I think a lot of athletes, what they do a disservice because we create artificial ceilings for ourselves, right? We're so secure and comfortable in who we are as athletes. When we're done playing, it's tough to transition to new environments, to new types of people, to get out of our comfort zone and get into business or other things. I think a lot of athletes go back into coaching or front office work or personal training, which some of them need to do, right? Like that's great. Like those are great jobs. But I think other people do it only because that's where they're most comfortable or secure, and they don't even entertain the option of other things. And for us, like providing that network where you can go speak to people in all different types of industries who are athletes you share a lot in common with, and learn from having those relationships, those built-in relationships of being a part of a network. I hope that changes. And we can be the catalyst to that change.
Now, were you always this business savvy, like as a freshman in FSU? Because I can't remember the kid's name, but the QB that replaced Trevor Lawrence, and I don't know why I remember this story, like after Trevor left, this kid took over, and he was asked, what team do you want to be drafted by? This kid was probably 19, 20 years old. He goes, I want to be drafted by the team that doesn't have a state income tax. Like, to be that smart about like business sense, like I want to go to Texas or Florida where I don't have to pay state income tax. Like, were you that savvy as a freshman at FSU, or were you? Because I wonder if it's a generational thing. Like now the kids that are in college now really get it.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that would probably be more savvier by not saying something like that, because I just want to play in the NFL, so I don't really care, But I think I always care deeply about how I performed outside of the field, right? I took academics very seriously. I don't have some great entrepreneurial journey. I was not selling, lemonade at a lemonade stand at 3 years old. But I was always interested in off-field things. A lot of my friends my closest friends, even in college, were not, obviously I had a lot of great close friends and best friends on the football team, but a lot of other friends who were not in sports, who were doing other things. I think learning from them and having access to different types of people, I was always very interested in. It's interesting in sports, especially in a sport like football, where you're convinced that like football is all that matters and everything else is a distraction. I think a lot of us didn't do a good job of creating opportunities for us off the field to find those things that are interesting or have that business savvy. And I do think that's changing. I think obviously now a lot of athletes are building brands outside of the field. I think there's much more of an appetite from the front office and the coaching staff to allow that to happen. But no, I always had an interest, but I didn't take that much of an action plan of having, this great entrepreneurial story before I left football.
Awesome. All right, a couple more things. One is, where do you see the Post going? I mean, is it, we've talked about Soho House multiple times here. Could it be a Soho House where there's posts in multiple cities across the country? I mean, not to let the cat out of the bag here, but like, is that what you're visioning down the road of being able to spread the word and build these communities in different cities?
Yeah, for sure. So, right now our membership is a nationally based membership. We have people we call national members who are not in New York City, which makes up 2/3 of our membership. A third of our members are in New York City, which is where our first clubhouse space is. I mean, we launched kind of the whole network back in April. This past April, we opened up, the first clubhouse space in New York at the end of September. So, we haven't been around for that long. We've had, almost 1,600 people apply to join now to date. And so, our vision is, yes, let's continue to grow the network. Obviously there are a lot of network effects as you get better, but still, having this exclusive application process where we care about the quality of the people that are in. We don't say no to people. We say, the only people we say no to are if they didn't qualify in the athletic background side. We just say not yet, like, again, build out a little more of your business resume, become more of a business veteran, and then we'll let you in. Is how we think about it. But yeah, I think for us, can we go build physical clubhouses in 20 to 30, 35 cities across this country, probably following this pro sports markets. Obviously the major markets make make a lot of sense, but can you go to the Indianapolis and Kansas Cities and Austin, Texases of the world and build spaces out there? What's also interesting is, the United States is not the only sporty country out there. We've already had people apply from Europe, from Africa, from Australia. Can we go make this an international opportunity and bring about a global network with clubhouses and other international cities and places? And, that's obviously a lot further down the line, but yeah, we hope to have a more, robust, offering of these physical spaces and these, this idea of having a, in-person locker room that our community can access.
Awesome. That's great. And last thing from me is, please let me know if this is true or false. On your Wikipedia page, it says that you had your wedding meal at Arby's. Please tell me that's not true and that someone went into your Wikipedia page, maybe an angry Vikings fan went in there and changed that. Did you really have your wedding meal at Arby's?
Yes and no. Yes, in the fact. So I'll tell you this backstory. I'll try to make it quick. So me and my wife, we decided that we were gonna get married, and we just couldn't wait anymore. She was not pregnant. That's not the motivation of why we did it. And we decided on it was a Monday or Tuesday during the season that we're gonna drive to a courthouse and just do it on a whim. My thought was, in Minneapolis, I can't do this in Minnesota because people will recognize me and we want this to be quiet. Our thought was, let's do this now. We'll have a wedding in the spring where everyone will think like, oh, that's our real wedding. That's actually when we're getting married, but secretly, oh, we've been married for months. And, the reasoning, I don't know. But my thought was, I can't do this in Minnesota. We have to go somewhere else because people will know and the word will get out. And so my beautiful Florida State brain said, let's go to Wisconsin and do it there. And so that's what we do. We take the first exit in Wisconsin to Hudson, Wisconsin, which is just on the other side of the border, which is basically still a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul. Talk to the clerk. We're like, hey, we want to apply for a marriage license or wedding license. Oh yeah, great. That's easy. And they're like, well, we also want to get married today. And she's like, well, I gotta see if the city clerk can do it. Like, let me make sure. And she's like, how about you give me an hour and then come back and maybe we'll have something set up for you. So we had an hour to burn. We were hungry. there was an Arby's half a mile down the road, and that's where we went and got our pre-wedding meal. And then we went back. We got married that day, and it was pretty funny. We didn't have witnesses. We needed to go track down 2 witnesses. They grabbed 2 random people. I knew it was a bad sign at the end. Like the woman was like, "That was so beautiful. Can you sign this autograph for this piece of paper for my son?" I was like, "Oh no!" Like, and we told like we want this to be quiet. Please don't let anyone know about this. And of course, like that night, I get a text from like one of the local beat writers. "Hey, did you just get married in Wisconsin today?" And so then I had to call my mom and tell her like, "Hey, I got married today." And it was funny. So our official wedding photos from that day, they sent us pictures of us walking in the parking lot from the security footage, like of us walking in the parking lot into the building, and then walking out of the building, married, back to the car. And so those are our official wedding photos. I think even in like the Hudson newspaper a couple weeks ago, the city clerk was like, I thought I was on candid camera. He didn't think it was real.
Well, thank you for clearing that up, because I was like, wait a minute, you're taking Samantha Ponder to Arby's for celebration. So it was like an appetizer for the wedding to go get Arby's. Do you remember what you had? Was it the beef and cheddar, or did you get something exotic?
No, I'm not a big beef and cheddar guy. It always made me mad. I just like the classic roast beef. It always made me mad when like they come out with the 5 for $5 deals, but they'd make it exclusive to like the beef and cheddar. I'm like, but isn't that more expensive? Like with the cheddar on top? I just want the plain roast beef. I was always a roast beef. You got to mix the Arby's sauce and the horsey sauce together. Curly fries, Dr. Pepper. That's my go-to Arby's meal.
I wonder, do you celebrate your anniversary by going out to Arby's? I know in New York City it's hard because I don't think there's a lot of them, but have you ever tried?
There's not a lot. We've not done it in a few years. And when I don't do it, my wife always reminds me like we didn't do Arby's today. And so it's definitely like we should do it. And our anniversary is actually this Sunday. So I got to track down some Arby's and make sure we have it for our beautiful candlelit dinner with some Arby's roast beef and curly fries.
I love that. Nowadays with Uber Eats and Postmates, I mean, you might be able to do it so you don't have to even leave the house and have someone photograph you while you're leaving. But it's been a great chat. His name's Christian Ponder, CEO and co-founder of The Post. I'm looking forward to see what happens. I wish I could be eligible for The Post, but I only played 2 years of high school football. But it seems like a great organization. I wish you the best of luck, Christian.
Well, I appreciate it, Joe. And if you're ever in New York City, swing by the space. We'd love to have you come by.
Absolutely. And that'll do it for another Forbes Books podcast. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. You can always connect with me on X, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Joe Pardavila or TikTok at J Pardavila. And please, don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.